She's going to be talking tonight on the benefits of native plants. Anne has a great background in it. She has been a master naturalist, a master gardener for many years now. She takes a lot of she's very involved with the Native Plant Society, helping them out, taking training from them. And for, I don't remember how many years, she's worked with Molly Haller. And when Molly Haller retired, she took over as the coordinator, volunteer
This
coordinator
meeting is being recorded.
at the Molly Haller Wildscape. So she's got a lot of experience. And in addition to that, she has her own business since 2005, helping to design and install native plant landscaping. So she is now going to let her take over.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. And like I said a little while ago, I've noticed some people that were in the chat that may know a bit more than I do. So please, if I say something wrong or not from your point of view, please let me know. And you also might see a couple of pictures that you recognize of your own property in here. Anyway, I want to, I'm sorry. It's not doing it. Okay. Let's click on it. Oh, okay.
Recording in progress.
What was that?
I don't know.
Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to native plants besides the beauty of them, but I'm going to mainly talk about these three areas: the environment, community, and how they're beneficial to the homeowner. As you can see on this, Texas is a pretty big state with a variety of ecosystems. Based on which source you look at, there could be as few as 6 or as many as 10 or even more than that. But this slide shows you different ecosystems from the east of Texas to the west. And if you look at the satellite picture, you can see how it's much greener in the east than it is in the west. That gives you a clue to how much rain we get. And speaking of rain, here's a couple of sources of maps that show the average rainfall. In the far west Texas, we get as much as 55 inches of rain on a regular year, all the way to the west where they only get 10 inches of rain. So you can see, just based on rainfall alone, that the plant life is probably going to be a lot different from east to west and north to south. So you need to consider when you're choosing your plants, just because it says it's native doesn't mean it's native to your area. So you need to watch out for that, because there are quite a few things in East Texas that would not survive much farther west, at least not without a lot of extra water. Okay, and speaking of rain and how we don't have much rain in the west part of Texas, one of the things that's great about native plants is the root systems go much deeper. They've evolved the plants have evolved to handle our climate and our different soil types. And so they've developed not only deep root systems, the drought tolerance by the way their leaves are, could be a gray leaf, furry leaves, whatever. And then the relationship with plants and animals has evolved together, so they provide each other what they need. Whereas if you bring in an exotic plant, even though an animal might make use of it, it may not have everything it really needs. Okay, and here's Did I go back or did I go
No,
forward?
it was the next. one.
Okay. Okay. So this is this shows the root systems of our native plant, some of our native plants compared to turf grass. If you look over here in the far left corner, that is not corner, but the far left side, that is the one of a turf grass. I don't know if that's Bermuda or
Kentucky
well,
Bourbon.
Kentucky rye. So this is based on somewhere else, but the application still applies because our turf grasses that we use here don't get much deeper than 6 to 8 inches, whereas all our native plants go much, much deeper to help with water, getting water. That deep root system not only helps with drought tolerance, but it also helps with other things such as water percolation when it rains. So it takes it down and helps clean the water. So if there's any runoff that might have some pollutants in it, that helps clean the water before it gets to our water table. It also helps with erosion. So we can use our native plants to help in areas that are erosion prone, like slopes and stream banks, so forth, like that.
Is anybody having a problem with their screen? I know Skip Cave said that he can't see Ann's screen. Does anybody else have that issue?
We can't see the,
Yeah, we can't see the screen. We just black. We have a black screen, so something. It may be our side of it. I don't know, but we're not getting the thing. I may have to re-sign back in or something, see if that works.
That may, you're the only one. That's probably that situation. Okay.
All right, I'll go.
A
I'll go
lot of
off.
a lot of us are seeing the speaker notes, double screens.
Okay.
Yeah. We're seeing the next slide, 2 slides side by side, and it's interfering with the detail.
Okay, I'm seeing nothing, just black.
So hold on a
I
second.
see everybody's picture, videos of all.
Okay, let's.
How's that?
Gotcha.
No, it's still.
Maybe what you're
No
asking.
different.
I'm gonna get out
There you
and come
go.
back and see if I can.
Now the speaker notes are gone, so that's good.
Okay,
Yeah,
you
it's good
see the
now.
one slide?
Yeah, we're just seeing one slide.
Okay,
All right, I'm gonna leave and come back.
okay. So as I talked before, native plants evolved with our fauna and provide what they needed, and the fauna provides what the plants need as well. And here is a few samples of what we usually see as landscapes all over the country, not just here in Texas, but all over the country. And if you look, this doesn't really provide a whole lot for animals. It doesn't provide food, especially when there's nothing but hardly anything but grass, because grass doesn't provide, turf grass doesn't provide any kind of food source. And it doesn't provide much for habitat as far as cover or materials for them to make dens or pollinators or anything like that. Especially this house on the upper right, left-hand corner. In the winter, there's nothing to show to help with animal life. It's pretty barren. So even though these may look neat and a lot of people like this kind of thing, it doesn't do anything as far as our ecosystem's concerned. So in contrast, if you plant our native plants, you'll start getting birds and insects and all kinds of stuff. And that makes the yard a lot more interesting to look at. There is an author, Doug Tallamy, who wrote a book called Bringing Nature Home, and he's written few other books too, and I've heard him speak, and he talks of a couple that had gone to him asking why they don't have their animals, and the nature that they had when they went to buy their house, or not a house, but some property. And this is up in the north, but it applies here as well. They loved that piece of property because of all the nature that was there. And so when they moved in, they built their house, they put in a traditional landscape, and they complained that nothing was there. They didn't see any of the animals or wildlife that they had seen when they first fell in love with the property. So he told them, well, that's why you took all that out, and that's what they need. So I said, as soon as they started developing their property with the native plants from there, it brought back all the animals, and they were much happier then. Another reason why you should use native plants is because some plants that are used in our landscapes, in traditional landscapes like Nandina, can cause problems with for the wildlife, especially berry-eating birds like this cedar waxwing. When they come through in the winter and they need berries to help with their migration, and there's not anything around, only Nandina or a few other plants that might have berries on it, the Nandina especially is harmful for them because it has a cyanide compound in it. And that cyanide compound, if they get enough of that, can either kill them or seriously debilitate them. And so I have actually found a cedar waxwing myself, and I didn't find the picture of it, but I suspect that's what killed it, because it wasn't anywhere near a window that it could have hit, and it looked very good otherwise and wasn't mauled. So I suspect, because there were a lot of Nandinas around, that that's what killed it. Also, a lot of butterflies, they need particular types of plants as host plants. And even though there might be an exotic variety of that plant, the native plants are what they prefer. So there must be something in the natives that's not in the exotics that help with that. Okay. And then of course, if you put in non-natives, not only do they not feed a lot, but they can also become highly invasive, like privet and Nandina is one of them. Japanese honeysuckle, which can destroy trees. It can actually choke trees and kill them. Privet makes a monoculture, so it deters our native plants from growing, and monocultures are just not good for our wildlife. Okay, so help with the environment. Okay, like I said before, plants have evolved with our climate, our soils, our just our regions. So you don't need to use near as much water. Most people can get away with not, except for when they're establishing the plant, they can get away with not watering them at all unless there's a really bad drought. But if you want them to look a little bit better, you can add some water. But most people, even then, water too much. An inch of rain or an inch of irrigation can mitigate when plants are starting to look wilty. And you always want to check if they're wilting in the evening, in the morning, not in the evening, because in the evening, many plants automatically wilt just to hold on to their water. If they're fresh looking in the morning, then it doesn't need any extra water. Okay, as I mentioned before, it helps to slow down erosion due to those deep roots. We can help recharge the aquifers instead of having everything run off. It improves water and air quality by absorbing pollutants through the roots and the top of the plant. And it sequesters carbon. In fact, a lot of prairies, they've found that they sequester carbon even better than forests. And one reason is because of those deep, deep roots. And another reason is because if there's a forest fire, it releases all those carbons back into the atmosphere. Whereas if there's a fire on a prairie, there's not near as much carbon that's released back into the atmosphere. It's all underground. And then that comes back quickly and takes it back into the ground. You don't need near as many pesticides, because if you let things grow in a balance with the bugs and that's naturally here, then you have other animals or other organisms taking care of what is called so-called the bad bugs. As somebody put it to me, there's no such thing as a bad bug. There's only good bugs and good bug food. So if you get rid of the bad bugs, you're getting rid of food for lots of things like baby birds, lizards, and much more. And you don't need much chemical. You don't need chemical fertilizers. If you do want fertilizing, the best to use is compost. Our plants have grown and evolved without needing all that stuff. You use chemical fertilizers a lot when you're using exotic plants, because they're not used to our weather, our soils, and so on. So you have to add whatever you think they might need to get them good, looking good. Oop, wrong button. Come on. There. Okay. Native plants, obviously, from what I've said already, is a key component to our natural areas. Everything works together. But when you don't use our native plants and the exotics become invasive, that can cost all of us a lot of money. It costs us in taxpayer dollars to help mitigate getting rid of these invasives. It costs our agriculture a lot to get rid of them. And it costs volunteered hours. And I know just about every one of you know how much we have to deal with privet and other invasives that are in our natural areas. And it just boggles my mind that this is how much we spend annually on taking care of these invasives. If we just not use them, it would help. Okay, maintenance. You can deal with native plant landscapes different ways, but most of the time you don't need to use a lot of machinery. So you don't need, usually don't need to mow. There are times when you can mow. You don't need edging. So those two machines, you don't need. Hedging, don't need to do that. Most shrubs, if you just let them go on the way they want to grow, they'll have a nice form. And then you can prune, what they call pick prune, where you can prune just one or two limbs off. You don't need to shave it. And by the way, if you do hedge and make them into boxes or round balls or any of that sort of shape, birds don't like that, or they perceive it as a wall. So they don't use that as much as they would a natural shaped shrub. So again, I said less fertilizer, so you don't have to get out there and keep applying fertilizer. And there's little to no watering needed. So those are ways that you're saving in maintenance. and not to mention money, because you're not having to pay to have somebody mow your yard or edge it or hedge it. You're not having to buy these expensive machines. They are not there to, you don't have them to pollute the air. And okay, so those are some great reasons not to use exotics. Okay, another reason is our native plants can handle extremes events that we have, like this one in 2021, where we had that huge freeze. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, that was a 3-inch snow that was on my property. But it was just sudden. That was February 14th. It just came down in buckets. And not only, oops, excuse me. Oop, I can't go back. How do we go back? There we go. One more. One more. Okay. What was I going to say? Sorry. Okay, so that weather situation was almost 2 weeks of freezing weather, and much of that was a long string of single-digit freeze. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, after that freeze, when spring finally did come, there was a lot of damage all over town. If y'all remember going around town and seeing a lot of dead trees and dead shrubs. These are just a couple of them that show that. On the left is Indian hawthorn. It just obliterated it. And the one on the right is waxleaf ligustrum, which not only is it killed it, which I was happy for, because that was on a property that I took care of, but because it's an invasive. But if you look in the background on the picture on the left, the shrubs that are in the background are native plants, and they look like they're just fine. There's waxleaf ligustrum back there, and yopon and beautyberry just to the left of that Indian hawthorn. Okay, one thing that native plants do, if you're planting within your region, it provides you a sense of place. And I don't know about y'all, but I really enjoy, when I take a road trip, seeing the different ecosystems and seeing how things change. If you go and from one town to another and everything looks the same, I think that's rather boring. Okay. And they've done studies on native natural habitats, where people who visit them or live near them, they live longer, they have less stress, more mental acuity. And as you know, there's been a lot of talk about nature. What's the word I'm thinking of? I am sorry. People are nature deficient. They're not getting out there and enjoying nature and seeing nature. And I mean, you can see it on these two little kids. They were out at the wildscape, and you can't see it in the picture, but there were queen butterflies flying all around that mist flower, and they were just having a ball chasing them and watching them. And that's just, for me, that's just a great scene to see kids and other people enjoying what they see out in nature. Okay. If you have a native landscape or a traditional landscape, it doesn't change a whole lot from year to year or from season to season. I mean, usually people use the same old bedding plants from year to year, and the trees don't change much in color or anything. And especially if you're hedging those plants, even the natives, you don't see the berries very much because you're hedging that off. But with native plants, and especially if you let them grow naturally, they provide you a lot of interest throughout the year. So there's a lot of change. And for me, that change is a lot more interesting than it staying the same. So you like here in the spring, you get all the fruit flowering trees like plum and possum haw and not possum haw, excuse me, rusty black haw and red buds, buckeyes, all those blooming in the spring. And then in the summer, you've got a lot of those late spring and early summer, especially. You got all the wildflowers and so much more color. And fall brings a lot of berries, like the beauty berry, and in this winter, the possum haw shows off real pretty. Besides color and interest, you have interest by different textures. Using those different textures is much more interesting to have that instead of just a flat lawn all across the front. So this, to me, gives kind of a sculptural feel, this agave here, and cactus also. So you have all kinds of different textures to use. For a softer texture, you've got a lot of different sedges, and this also gives a nice kind of lawn look without having to mow it. So you've got this soft flowing sedge, and there's lots of different sedges you can use. And it just has a different feel to it when you walk in there, kind of a calming feel. Then these are all kinds of different little textures here with a mix of different wildflowers. And then you have grasses in color, which add a lot of color and texture, especially in the fall for the grasses. And not only do they add color in the fall, but once they get large enough, they will have movement in it. So they sway, and it's kind of like being out, at a beach where you see the grasses flow back and forth. I just love the way that shimmers. This Indian grass here on the right is one of my favorites. And you get a nice stand of that with it backlit. It just glitters like gold. I don't see how you can beat that. And what most people want is color. So we've got color. Boy, do we have color. Of course, I'm starting off with white, but that's a color too. And these are just a few of what we've got. So we've got Blackfoot daisies, frostweed, prickly poppy, and these all bloom at different times of the year too. Blackfoot daisy blooms most of the year. And some of these others just bloom one time of the year. And there's that Mexican buckeye that I was mentioning earlier. Just let you see the different colors here of our plants. And I want to point out that most of these pictures are ones I took myself, so they're not out of some magazine. The ones that I didn't take are from friends that took them for me or had them and I borrowed them. And speaking of this picture on the bottom right, that's our native wisteria. So if you like wisteria, please don't use the Chinese or Japanese wisteria because that is on the invasive list. And it can cause a lot of problems, not just for our natural areas, but for you personally, because it can bring down a structure because it's so strong that, like, if it's planted on some pergola or a trellis, it will just bring that pergola or trellis down at a certain point. Whereas the native is not like that. It's a lot more well behaved. And the main difference between those two as far as looks is that the native will leaf out before the flowers, and on the Asian, it will flower before it leaves out. And a bunch of yellow flowers, and this, of course, is only samplings of what we've got. Okay, a lot of people ask me, well, you know, I can't get grass to grow underneath my trees. What can I do to get it to grow? Well, I ask them to consider not having grass. If they want a lawn look, there are things that they can use instead of lawns. I mean, instead of grass, like frog fruit. Frog fruit is pretty shade tolerant, and horseherb, which is very shade tolerant. And both of those not only provide a more lawn looking area, they don't need to be mowed, although you can mow them to make them flatter. But they also provide nectar for the tiny little butterflies. And the frog fruit also provides, is a host plant for common buckeye. And it may be host plant for other plants, other butterflies, but I know for sure it is for the buckeye. So you're again, you're feeding butterflies and insects and all kinds of things when you let the native plants grow. And as you know, many of you may know, everything's connected. If you get rid of one thing, you're making a domino effect on things to collapse. Okay, I want you to think of ground covers as something other than something just flat and like a grass lawn. Ground covers can be any plant that can cover a large area. That's what that means by ground cover. Like this coral berry here, which is I think is one of my favorite ground covers for the shade. It's airy when it's just in its green form, and then in the fall the berries start forming and they persist through until spring. Usually there's a little bit left. So you've got that beautiful kind of magenta-ish color through the winter and the light airy leaves during the spring and through fall. Now also scarlet sage, tropical sage, same thing. That's a great ground cover. You can let it grow to its natural height, which is around 12 to 18 inches. But you can also keep it at a particular level, about say 8 to 10 inches, and it will look more uniform that way and also bloom more. So, and you can do that by using a line trimmer. And that is a great one for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds and other butterflies love scarlet sage. Okay, some other ground covers. Now these are ones that are evergreen. The other ones that I showed you are not evergreen, but these are. I got lyre leaf sage over here on the left. When it blooms, pretty much one main bloom and sometimes a couple of other little blooms through the rest of the year, but in the spring, it'll bloom proficiently. And then the rest of the time, it's the rosette plant. And as you can see, that all that purple veination, it just provides a lot of extra interest. Some have more of that veination than others, depending on the time of year and how much sun it gets. But I think that's a lovely plant. And it covers very well. You just need to make sure, because it can take over an area, to cut back those seed heads or the bloom stalks before it spreads too much, if that's what you were looking out for. Then there's the sedges. Again, it's evergreen, and there's so many different kinds of sedges that can have a little bit different texture from one to another. This is a fine textured called cedar sedge. And then there's Cherokee sedge, which is a bigger plant, and so many other kinds of sedges that have much coarser look to them. And then this yellow flower on the right, that's golden groundsel. It blooms in the spring, and it's a fairly early bloomer, so it feeds the pollinators that come out early. And then it goes to seed, and you can cut those seed heads off, and you have this nice, lovely little ground cover for the rest of the year. And that, as again, I said, that was a evergreen plant. Okay, once you get your, if it's decided you want to do a native landscape, you think, oh, well, what's it going to look like? How am I going to enjoy it? Well, here's a couple of them right here. You can have them look a little bit wild like this on the left, which is totally just haphazard, or a little bit more maintained, like on the right, where it's got paths and some grass back there, which is, I believe, buffalo grass, and then the beds. Then they can also draw you in by using different ways to plant and use stones and trellises to draw you into your space. So it looks more like a garden, not just a whole big lawn. And then you can, again, have a big expanse of grass, which this one does. I didn't show the grass part, but it has really big beds that have the native plants with a large lawn. That was to help satisfy her husband. But this way she still gets to enjoy all the native plants and what attracts it. And then you can have your own private little oasis. This one, this house faces west. So this one's great because it shades the house from the west sun and the heat from the street and helps keep the house cooler. And all this grass in the front, that's buffalo grass, doesn't get mowed, but maybe once a year, and some sedges, and it still looks neat and trim. And then on the other side of those trees is a little patio where you can sit and enjoy your front yard even without having too much interfering from the traffic behind you. And then most of all, it's going to be beautiful because you're going to bring in all the different colors of the palette and all the life that comes with it. Butterfly, you won't believe how many butterflies you'll have when you start putting in native plants. It's just amazing to me. That's just another form of color and movement, and you get to enjoy that. And then the birds that come in for the pollinators. I remember going by some plum trees while they were blooming, and I could hear all the pollinators all over them. And not only could you hear you see all the bees and other pollinators on the flowers, but the birds came in looking for the pollinators to feed their young. So I got to see some little warblers come in eating the insects that were feeding on the plum. So it was all kind of a big circle there, big web of food chain, not a food chain, but a food web. And it's just exciting. For me, it's exciting to see things as they change and see new stuff come up from one year to the next, because usually with a native lawn or native habitat yard, you get things that move around a bit. And if you do, you may not want it there, but if that way you get to share those plants with your friends. Okay, and where can you get native plants? There's different ways to get it. There, more and more nurseries are becoming aware that people want native plants. So you've got some native nurseries, even some big name places are carrying at least a few native plants, but beware, some of those may have use insecticides that are systemic, and you don't want that because then you're going to be killing your pollinator plants. So you need to ask if they use systemic. If you buy it from, say, a big box store or someplace like Callaway's, check and make sure they don't use that. Then there's Native Plant Society. A lot of them, a lot of the chapters have sales in the spring and fall. And in fact, on May 4th at River Legacy, our native chapter, the North Central chapter, is having their plant sale at River Legacy. Also, NIPSOT, you can join NIPSOT and hear of plant rescues. I don't know if you were on earlier, but what's his name? Dick. I'm sorry, Dick. Dick was mentioning about plants that were rescued that John Snowden helped us rescue from a site in Burleson that's going to be bulldozed, and we got permission to dig up all these wonderful plants. So that you should be aware of. Also, people just like to share their native plants. Like I mentioned earlier, if you have some that come up in a place where you don't want it or can't use it, you have too many, then people like to share those plants.
Pass along plants.
Yeah, pass along plants. And then if you go to a garden and volunteer, like the Wildscape, but there's lots of other volunteer projects where they use native landscapes, then a lot of times you can get extra plants from them. So not only do you get to benefit from those plants being given away, but you also, when you're working at as a volunteer, you learn a lot more. And then speaking of learning more, here's some different sources that you can learn. Books, of course. I mentioned Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy, and he's got other books that are really great. That's a great one. Even though he is from up, I think, Philadelphia or Pennsylvania somewhere, his philosophy is just as good no matter where you live. Now, then there's the Native Texas Plants Landscaping Region by the Wasowskis. That is now not on being published anymore, but if you look at sales for like half-price books or other places that sell used books, eBay, even Amazon will have used books. You can get it that way, and that's a great starter book because it has a lot of good information in there. It tells you how to take care of the plants and where they're originally from, and a lot of good information on that. And then also you can join your Native Plant Society. That you can learn a lot just from the other members and from the meetings. You can take the NLCP class from Native Plant Society. You do not have to be a member, but you get it cheaper if you're a member. So, and I'm going to say that. Native NLCP stands for Native Landscaping Certification Program. And you do not have to take it to get certified. I mean, you have to take it, you can take it to get certified, but you don't have to take it intending to get certified. You just have to take a test at the end to become certified. But if you don't want to be certified, you just want to take the class, you can still take it. And you just have to look online at nipsot.org to see where there might be a class in your area. Different levels are being done at different chapters. Also, as I mentioned earlier, volunteering at a public native garden like the Wildscape. You learn a lot from your other volunteers and you might get some free plants. And then online, wildflower.org is that's the Native Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. That's their website. They've got lots of good information on there. You can peruse the website for native plants. They also have lists of plants that are good for your area or good for certain types of situations, like a rain garden or dry area. Also, you can ask Mr. Smarty Plants question if you need to. That's something on wildflower.org. If you have something in specific that you're having problems with, they usually try to get to you pretty quickly. Then on Facebook, there are different Facebook pages that have great information on them, but one I really like is Texas Flora. It covers the whole state. You don't have to know anything to look at it. You don't even have to join it to look at it. But if you want to post or comment, you have to ask to join it. But there's a lot of good information on there, and people that don't know anything to really good experts that know their stuff on there. So check that out, and they have lots of good pictures and all kinds of good information. And then that's my information. And I'm sure a lot of you will recognize that spot. But do any of y'all know when that was taken? And you can unmute. Anybody know what time of year that was?
I guess by the tree leaves, that was late summer.
Not too far off. I'm trying to open this. It was, okay, I'm sorry. It was November, middle of November. So, what are you doing? Well, go ahead. But anyway, that's my presentation. I'm sorry, I'm a little, anyway, I hope y'all got some good information. I know a lot of y'all already know a lot of this stuff. But anyway.
Hey, Ann, a question for you.
Okay.
What's your company's name?
Native Gardener, but it's just me. So
Okay.
At one point I did register that name, but now there's a nursery called Native Gardener.
Mhm.
I let that lapse. So most people just, know
And
my name.
what companies in the area can help implement some of these? Well, like ecological landscaping type companies.
Well, the nurseries, I would go to a standalone nursery, not the big box stores. And because there's some people like Weston Gardens is a good resource because they have people there that know that, not just come in and are working for a paycheck. They actually know their stuff. And then there's several other, like I mentioned earlier, Native Gardener and Euless. They're building a good nursery there. And there's a couple in Fort Worth. And, just get involved with Native Plant Society and get information. That way, I think that's one of your best ways to do it. Or if I do consultations, if you want to ask me, I can do a consult or I can do a design, but I don't install. So mainly you would have to find somebody to install it if you can't do it yourself.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. See what else?
That's the first question.
Are Asian ladybugs a problem for native plants? If so, do we need to do anything to encourage native ladybugs and deter the Asian variety? You know, I haven't really done a lot of research on that. But I haven't seen too much of a problem around here that with the Asian ladybugs. Somebody else might have a better answer for you than I do, but if some people go and buy ladybugs as pest control, and I would just check with whoever you buy it from, buy the larva from, to see if it's the native or if it or which one it is. And let's see any more. That's it. That was the only question. Does anybody else have any questions?
Are the native ladybugs the little red ones that we know so well?
Yes, you can go online and there are different resources that can show you a comparison of the different ladybugs. And
It's
you
the
just
ones
put
I've bought.
you can put in native ladybug versus Asian ladybug and click pictures and it'll show you different ones.
Yeah, the ones I bought were always already crawling around, and they were at Hanley Feed Store, which usually has pretty good stuff. But
yeah, well, and if you can get the larva rather than the ladybug itself, that's better because the larva is what really eats the aphids and other things. So larva, it will stick around a lot longer.
good
And
to know. Thank you.
And the ladybugs, you don't, if you get the adult ladybugs, you might want to make sure you do it in the evening just before dusk, put them out, because then they will sit in the landscape for at least a little while and maybe even lay eggs. So that way they'll stay there rather than just fly away. If you do it in the morning or in the afternoon, they can potentially fly away and not really do what you want them to do.
Thanks. Good to know.
How do you start a patch of frog fruit? From Annabelle. Thanks for asking that. Well, if you can do it by a couple different ways other than just buying a start of a plant, but I would, if you have just strips of frog fruit from someone, you can just pin it down in the ground at each node, and that will help start the roots going. And that usually does a pretty good job of getting it started. You don't necessarily have to have a plant that's fully rooted, but of course that's even better if you do. And every time you check on it and you see another branch come off, just pin that where you want it to grow. Okay. Okay. And I think that's all the questions I have. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I had one, and that was that if you are engaged for a consultation and design, would you then be able to give referrals to a number of nurseries that are reputable and for providing actual and quality native plants?
I think, yes, I can.
Thank you.
Let's see, somebody asked what do I use to pin down frog fruit? Well, you can do for anything that you're going to pin down, they call it layering is one term for it, is you can use a rock that's not going to move. I mean, a little rock for frog fruit. Or you can get a paper clip and unfurl it and just pin it down using that. That's one way I've used, and that usually works pretty well. See what else. What is the impact of climate change on native plants? Okay, Dick. Right now, we're finding that things are blooming differently than they have in the past, either earlier and later. But it's hard to tell exactly. They do seem to be handling climate change better than exotics, because they're used to kind of strange weather anyway here in Texas, because our weather is swings pretty far to no rain, to lots of rain, to cold, to high heat. But the best thing you can do as far as protecting your plants, your landscape, is making sure you're watering properly. A lot of people water way too shallowly and too often, and that will make your plants keep their roots right near the surface. If you're watering too frequently, then they don't need to go down into the ground deep. So you water a good amount at a watering. That means at least 1 inch to 2 inches of water. You can check on that by putting out little cans to see how much you're watering, or you can check afterwards after you've watered by using a 6-inch from hilt to tip screwdriver and check several different places where you've watered. And if it goes easily into the ground to the hilt, that means it'll go down 6 inches, then that's plenty of water. But if you're watering and it doesn't get down to about 2 or 3 inches, that's not enough water. So when you do water thoroughly, and then you don't have to water near as often, and your roots will get down deeper. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, different plants, natives for under native trees. Well, I mentioned several earlier. The coralberry is one of my favorites under our native trees. In fact, I think in Wasowski's book, she says that's the main ground cover under a post oak woodland. So that obviously is a great one. If you don't want something that's shrubby, then sedges are great. They have a nice texture to them and they're evergreen. Then there's frog fruit and what's the other one I was saying? Horse herb. I love horse herb. It just has, and you make that look more like a lawn, and you can walk on it, and it's not going to withstand constant walking, but you can walk on it. Then scarlet sage is a great one underneath the trees. It takes a good amount of shade. There's quite a few others, and right now I can't think of them off the top of my head. Oh yes, Turk's cap, thank you. And if you've got sandy soil, there are pockets of sand in our area. There is something called Indian pink that makes a really good cover, and it's just a really pretty plant that has a pretty red bloom. Why it's called Indian pink, I don't know. Let's see, what else do we have?
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that answered it pretty well.
Okay.
So I appreciate that.
Really. And let's see, somebody's asking about plants to have interest in every season. The secret is just look, when you look at plants, just look at, say, oh, I would like to have that here, or and I like this plant. What does it do? Check and see how it behaves, when it blooms, when it berries, when it has its big show. How much, and of course you need to check and make sure what it needs as far as water, sun. If it doesn't take sun, all that stuff. Look at its requirements and make sure you put plants together that have the same requirements. Otherwise, it's going to cause you problems. But if you look at when the plants have their big show, that's how you can plan on having things throughout the season. Look at what blooms early, what blooms during the summer. There's a few things that will bloom during most of the warm season. Other things only have a significant bloom in spring and then again in fall. And then they're kind of dormant in the summer. But there's a lot of plants that just have a short time blooming. So you need to pay attention to that. Let's see. Is it, well, as far as too late to start a native garden now, it's not too late, but means you're going to have to pay attention a lot more right now. But even though we've had some nice rains, it can stop any time now. And once it stops and you've just installed your plants, it's going to take a while for them to get rooted in. So you need to make sure you're checking on that. The one native landscaper has a plan where if you just install some plants, you water every other day for the first week. Then the next 10 days, you water every other day. And the next 9 days, you water every 3 days. And then after that, you water when those plants need water. So it takes about 30 days to get that going. And even after that, if we have a really bad drought year like we did the last couple of years, you want to pay attention and make sure it gets watered. People think, oh, because it's native, you can just stick it in the ground, give it maybe one watering and that's it. No, it has to establish those roots first. Remember, in the wild, they plant themselves when they want to be planted. Those seeds germinate when it's scheduled to germinate, when it has the right conditions to germinate, when the temperature's right, the sun's right. So we're doing things in an artificial way, so we got to keep them alive in an artificial way until they're rooted in well. Anything else? You can just open it up and you don't have to type it in. You can open it up and ask, or unmute yourself and ask. Well, if there's no other questions, I think I'm done here.
Well, I think we have a lot of information. I got a lot of notes. So I certainly appreciate it. And if we can, if you can click that thumbs up from chat or just unmute and give Ann a hand for doing a great job of giving us information.
Well, thank you. And Grace had one more question.
Okay.
Would it be smarter to wait until fall? Fall is the best time to plant. So it's up to you though. You'll use less water. It's easier, it's cooler than having to worry about it during the summer.
Easier on the plant.
Easier on the plants.
Thank you, Ann. Great information.
Well, thank you. I hope it wasn't too dry.
No, it's wonderful.
Thank you.
We have most everybody still on mute, but anyway, big hand, and thank you.
Thank you.